Okay, let's dive into one of the most twisted literary mysteries I've ever come across. We're going to deconstruct the impossible crime at the very heart of Stephen King's The Dark Half. And it all kicks off with one simple but absolutely terrifying question.
Just imagine this for a second. The police knock on your door. They've got evidence, like undeniable physical proof that links you directly to a really brutal murder. Your fingerprints are all over the place.
But there's just one tiny problem. At the exact time the murder was happening, you were miles away. And you've got 24 witnesses to back you up. This is the absolute nightmare that our main character, Thad Beaumont, is living. So how on earth is that possible?
Right, so before we can even get into the evidence and the how, we have to look at the crime itself. Because let me tell you, this was not just some random act of violence. No, this was personal, it was bizarre, and it was horrifyingly intimate.
So the victim's name is Homer Gamache. He's a 67-year-old guy found beaten to death in a ditch. And it seems he made one fatal mistake, picking up a hitchhiker. But here's the detail that takes this from just a terrible crime to something way, way more sinister. The murder weapon? The killer used Homer's own prosthetic arm to do it. This wasn't just a murder, it was a statement, a really brutal, mocking one.
And the number one suspect, even with that rock-solid alibi, is Thad Beaumont. He's a respected author who's hiding a pretty dark secret, a violent alter ego that he seriously thought he had buried for good.
On one hand, you've got Thad Beaumont. He's a National Book Award nominee, a college professor, a family man. He writes this thoughtful literature on an old typewriter. But then you have his pseudonym, George Stark. And Stark, well, he's the complete opposite. He writes these incredibly violent, best-selling pulp novels. He's primal, he's merciless, and he writes everything by hand with a pencil.
So after years of making a fortune off of Stark's bloody stories, Thad decided, you know what, it's time to end this. So he stages this very public death for his dark half, complete with a whole photo shoot for People magazine to announce to the world that George Stark was officially dead.
And to really, put a nail in the coffin, they even made a fake gravestone for the photo shoot. The epitaph, not a very nice guy. It was supposed to be a little dark humor, a line Thad himself had used to describe Stark in an interview. He had absolutely no idea just how dark things were about to get.
Now, to understand who or maybe what George Stark really is, we've got to go back, way back to Thad's childhood. Because this darkness, it wasn't just in his head, psychologically speaking. It had a terrifying biological origin.
It all starts when Thad is just 11 years old. He begins getting these horrible headaches. Soon, they escalate into what he called an agony marathon. And right before each attack, he would hear this phantom sound, thousands and thousands of sparrows chirping. It all came to a head one day when he had a violent seizure on his way to school.
So they do some x-rays, and there it is, a shadow on his brain. The doctors immediately assume it's a tumor, and they rush him into emergency surgery, which, back in 1960, was incredibly risky. But what they found inside his skull, well, it was way more shocking than any tumor.
The surgeons opened him up, but they didn't find a tumor. No, they found something else entirely. Parts of another human being embedded in Thad's brain. We're talking a tiny, undeveloped eye that was still blinking, part of a nostril, fingernails, and even 2 human teeth, and one of them had a cavity.
The surgeon, Dr. Pritchard, had this just mind-blowing explanation. Thad had started out life as a twin, but in the womb, he had absorbed his sibling. It's a real phenomenon, but in Thad's case, the absorption wasn't complete. Parts of his twin had been lying dormant inside his brain for 11 years.
So what happens when Thad decides to kill his pseudonym? Well, that's when the line between fiction, memory, and reality just completely dissolves. The symbolic death of George Stark is about to trigger something very real and very, very dangerous. The very night after that magazine article comes out, Thad has this absolutely horrific nightmare. He hears a voice, Stark's voice, and it whispers a chilling message. I came back from the dead. It feels like so much more than just a bad dream.
And, you guessed it, that psychological terror from the nightmare, it doesn't just stay a nightmare. It spills right over into the real world. The very next morning, the groundskeeper at the cemetery where they did the photo shoot finds something deeply unsettling.
The spot where the fake gravestone had been, there's now a deep hole in the ground, like something clawed its way out.
Of course, there's no body, no coffin, nothing was ever actually buried there. But here's the crucial, chilling detail. There is a single set of footprints leading away from the disturbed earth, as if someone or something just climbed out and walked away.
And all of this brings us right back to the murder of Homer Gamache. The supernatural weirdness at the cemetery is now slamming head-on into a police investigation, creating this impossible loop of evidence that points right at Thad Beaumont. Eventually, the police track down Homer's stolen truck. It's been abandoned hundreds of miles away. And the inside? It is a forensic gold mine. It's covered in blood, and more importantly, fingerprints. The killer was sloppy and left perfect prints all over the rearview mirror.
So they run the prints through the system, and Sheriff Alan Pangborn is just floored. They aren't just similar to a set they have on file, they are a perfect, 100% absolute match to a known individual.
And this isn't some mistake at the local lab either. The match gets confirmed by the U.S. Armed Forces Identification Bureau using Thad Beaumont's official military records. The evidence is solid, irrefutable. The fingerprints from this brutal murder belong, without a shadow of a doubt, to an innocent man with a perfect alibi.
So we're left with this impossible, terrifying question. If Thad Beaumont didn't kill Homer Gamache, then who did? Who crawled out of that symbolic grave? If Thad is innocent, then who, or maybe more importantly, what, is George Stark?